Well, welcome everyone to Relaxed Roman Shades Session 2. Today's June 15th, and we're technically in the middle of this class. So hopefully I'm going to be able to cover all the questions that came into me within the slides that I've added for today's class. But remember, you do have a chat box up there in that little toolbar up on top if you want to ask a specific question. I've also added in a few slides from the first class back into this class just as reminders, because apparently when I recorded, you guys could see some of the students on the screen where I couldn't. I don't know what was going on, but if it becomes too much of a bother, I can always re-record the first session. So today I'm trying to make sure we only have me on the screen and we're going to be good to go. Now it is a little bit long today, so we may end up slightly over our 1 o'clock deadline. But today is session 2. And what we're going to do today is review session 1, including the cut layout, the cut plan for session 1 and the math. We're going to attach the rings in the weight bar. And yes, I'm going to give you a review of that wonderful magic of turning those bottom corners. We're going to cover the mount board, mount the shade, dress it, and show it operating, which it doesn't operate on the first shade, but to show you some views of the installation and stuff. And then we're going to add those side flaps, the return flaps. And that's going to be quite a bit of our time because it'll show you how to pattern match everything. And then at the very end, we're going to cut and prep for the second class project, getting ready, everything up to the point of sewing the bottom hem. So that's why I changed the picture for this class, because we're going to be getting into this beautiful shade, which is a fully functioning shade. So let's just review session 1. And this is going to have the class kits and the materials that you needed. Now, remember, we set everything in one big kit box, so you needed to get them separated out. We've reviewed how to measure your window, how to pre-plan as playing with your fabric, basically, on what you wanted to show on the flat part of your shade and what your folds were going to look like. We worked on how to figure yardage. Like I said, I'm going to do that again today so that we can see the whole screen. Working with pattern placement, you selected your fabrics. Hopefully you got everything cut and prepped for the first project. And remember, this first project is a stationary shade. It is not meant to function. So very much a stationary shade. We're going to finish that up first off. So this is the, let me see if I can't get rid of that toolbar for you. There you go. This is the figuring yardage for your first project. And I know I had quite a few questions on this because, again, there were other people on the screen that were taking up some of the shots for you. It's your finished length minus your fold is the pink, 36 inches for 6-inch folds is the red, 1/2 inch for your bottom hem is the green, and then the top is brown, and that's 3 inches to allow to mount onto your board that we're going to cover today. So if you take your finished width plus your 8 inches for your side hems, that's going to give you a number. Divide that by 54. Most home decor fabric is 54 inches wide. That gives you your number of cuts. And then once you add your pink, your red, your green, and your brown together, that's going to give you your cut length. Take your number of cuts, multiply it by your cut length, which ours was 1 cut. And divide that by 36 inches because we've worked now in inches and we want to get it into yards so that you can order yards or buy yards of material. So my class example finished 24 wide by 18 long. So real quickly, let me just go over this again. So the pink area, my finished length minus my fold was 18 minus my 4 folds gives me 14 inches. My permanent folds, the red area, 36 because I want to do 6 folds using 6 inches of fabric in each fold. My bottom hem is 1/2 inch. My mounting allowance is 3 inches, and add all that together gives me 53.5 inches in my cut length. So 1 cut, because I'm not doing any additional widths, times 53.5, all the way over, divide that by 36 gives me 1.5 yards. Now, because I don't know where the fabric is going to start and stop on the cuts, unless I'm standing in front of it when somebody cuts it for me, I'm going to round that up to 2 yards. And that way I can have, I'm going to scoot over just a little bit and get rid of my glare on my glasses. That way it will give me an opportunity to play a little bit more. I still have a glare on my glasses. Okay, I'll try that. So you need to cut the same width and cut length for your lining. Hopefully this gives you a better screenshot without a whole bunch of faces in your way. And that is just a review for that. Remember, it is on your handout also. So this is your turning the corner. This is the magic again. Someone asked to see this again, so I went ahead and put it in. I've already sewn the bottom hem. I've folded my 2 folds. Remember, when you fold in your side hems, the first fold stays with the crease line. The second fold goes against the crease line. And then you put your lining on top, sew it, and then we'll watch the video to turn this. So I'm just turning it on the table now instead of at the machine for you. Making sure that my seam allowance is up. And yes, this is a repeat. There's nothing new to this. It's the same thing that we did in the first class. Just wanted to show you again as a starting point. And some of you called me out on this for not taking my fabric all the way up the table and making it all nice and smooth. Don't need to. I only need to worry about those corners. So see, because we had the right side to the right side, when you turn it, you get that beautiful corner. So now I can finish by going up the shade, getting everything in line. And it was just one of those days where you do one side and it pulls the other side away. So you got to turn around, do the other side again. Just one of those days. I do want to make sure I'm ironing in my bottom hem. You want that to be nice and crisp. Now it's not really going to show when you do your shade, but it's a nice thing to iron everything and get it all nice and flat. It also gives your fabric and your lining just a little bit of static to each other so that it's going to be easier to smooth out. And I could take my ruler that I have there and use that as a handy tool to help me smooth things out, but apparently I opted to not use the ruler. And I'm just pinning in my side hems now. Because I creased them so well when I was ironing them, it's very easy just to flip this over and put a few pins in it. And I'm not going to close my side hem. I'm not going to hand sew it or machine stitch it or use any kind of glue or anything, because when I sew my rings on in the next couple steps, it's going to sew through all the layers and I'm going to catch that side hem. So I don't need to take the time to close my hem. I'm just finishing up the second side. Most people probably would have moved that over closer to them on the table. Okay, so we have everything ready to start marking the shade. Now I'm going to get into your safety standards just a teeny tiny bit. 16.9 inches is your combined loop. Combined loop means the back of the fabric and whatever you're using to lift your shade. And we're going to use shade cord in this event. It needs to be less than 16.9 inches on a functioning shade. We're doing a non-functioning shade, so I can pretty much stay somewhere under 8 inches. 6 inches worked out better for me for the math. That's why we had 6 folds at 6 inches for 36 inches of fabric. So I'm going to start marking at 6 inches. And I'm going to mark right where my rings go, which means I'm going to come up 2 inches on the side. First thing I want to do is mark my 36 inches that I'm using for my permanent folds. And then I'm going to measure my flat area that I used when I figured my yardage. And what I'm doing now is I'm figuring my finished length. This is where it's going to go on the board. So I just took my 2 length pins. I'm putting them sideways so that I can fold over at the pins and get a good iron crease on that. That should give me enough to cover the top of my board and turn under my raw edge before I staple everything down. So just a good iron press on that. And then I can open things back up. I can leave it folded. I mean, you could if you wanted to. Okay, get your pins ready. And we're going to start marking our 36 inches on the bottom. So we're going to have a ring right on the bottom for this shade. and it's going to be 2 inches in. My side hem just happens to be a perfect cheat for me because it's already 2 inches, so I don't have to measure that every time. And I'm just going to come up and measure my 6 inches every time. And I'll put in enough till I get to my 36-inch mark. And yes, in the video, I came up about a 1/2 inch before my first ring. You can plan for that if you want to. You have to add another 1/2 inch to your cut length. I don't like sewing through the 4 layers of the face fabric and the lining and through the ring and through the side hem for the first one. So I come up just a little bit. And Cheryl, can I ask that you turn off? There you go. Thank you. I can't seem to control it from my end. So what I've done is I've marked up my 6 permanent folds on here on both sides. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of housekeeping on how to sew your rings on. So first thing you want to know is we're using the plastic rings, the white ones that we sent in your kit. You could use metal rings for this. There's no problem with it. If that's what you have or that's what you like to buy, you can use those. You do want to use a matching thread color, matching to the face fabric. You want to make sure that your stitches are going to go all the way through to the front. So you want to make sure it's not going to be hot pink on a light blue fabric. If you double your thread, it's going to make your sewing much faster. And that is simply putting 2 lengths of thread through the needle eye at the same time. You can also fold it over and put the fold through the eye of the needle if you want to. And then preload multiple needles because you're going to be able to go up the sides of the shade a lot faster if you don't have to stop every time to load your needle, basically. We're going to triple knot each ring once we cut things off. And that's just because I don't trust a double knot, which means you're going to tie your shoe again, and then tie your shoe once more. So it's going to be 3 knots on top of each other. And then you could put a dab of glue on each of your knots once you've trimmed off the tails. I didn't in the video that's coming up, but you could if you wanted to. Just make sure you can control how much glue is coming out of your glue bottle. So I'm going to tell you 2 ways to sew on rings. They're going to attach the same. It's just 2 different methods. Some of you will do 1 ring at a time and then reload your needle and then do another ring and then reload your needle. And you're going to drive me crazy, basically. Time is money in a workroom. So let's do this a little bit more efficiently. What I've done is I've put a ring on each one of my pins. I've got my needle already pre-threaded, and I'm going through all the layers plus catching that side hem. Still getting a little bit of a glare on my glasses, so I'm going to try moving over just a little bit while you're watching this. See if that helps. So of course, when everybody's watching, you're going to end up with knots in your thread. Hopefully that won't do that when you get home. But the thread I'm using is a little bit coarser thread. It's a hand sewing thread, and its life has been spent around a spool. So it wants to curl and kink. You can get rid of some of these curls and kinks if you run your thread through some beeswax. You can get that at any sewing store, or you can just detangle as you go. And I'm trying to go through all the layers, like I said, plus catch that side hem. And now I can unpin and catch my second thread, my second ring rather. I just have to make sure that my shade is going to lay flat. Now this is going to, when we cut between the rings, it's going to give you very short tails. And that might be hard for some of you to try and tie that triple knot with those short tails. But remember, sometimes you're going to be 8 inches apart on your rings too, so you'll have more thread. But being 6 inches apart, it's going to be a little bit short when I cut them. Just working my way up the shade. Gets easier as your thread gets shorter. And I'm going through 3 times. That's going to give me 6 threads through each of the ring areas, so that's nice and secure. And try and hit your needle marks each time. So you're going through in the same area. I'm using my finger underneath to feel when the needle has gone all the way through. So just a little bit more of a close-up for you so you can see where I'm going. Mirjana, I apologize if I just slaughtered your name. Sorry about that. You could use a curved needle. You're right. It's very easy for some people to use a curved needle, and it's very hard for other people to use a curved needle. I will tell you one thing that I teach in my upholstery classes is the bigger your curved needle, the closer your stitches can be. It's completely opposite of what you think. But if you get a 2 or 3 inch wide across the flat part, here would be your curved needle. 2 or 3 inches here, you're able to manipulate that larger needle closer together to get a smaller pick in your fabric. Whereas if you use a very small curved needle, it's harder to manipulate it. So yes, you could grab your curved needle if you want to. You could take this to machine and machine tack every one of them on too if you wanted to, but I don't know why you'd want to. So now I'm just going to cut between. That leaves me about 3 inch tail on each one of these. And I can go through and do triple knots 3 times through. 2 is a knot, 3 is security. And this is where you'd want, if you want to use a dab of glue, you certainly can. I've timed it out. So personally for me, the second way I'm going to show you to tie your rings on is a little bit faster because it leaves me a little bit longer tails. But doing this way where you have continuous from one ring to another ring is very much faster than doing individual knots each time. I have a question that's come in. Can you record? I am recording this right now. So I guess if you want to record, you can. Just know that I'm going to send you the link for the recording after the class today. So all the hard work's done for you. And you can speed it up just a little bit, like what I'm doing right now is sew all your rings on, go back, clip them, tie all your rings, then trim them, and then do your dab of glue. It'd be just a little bit faster for you. Now you got to clean up all those little tails, which you'd have to clean up anyway. So now this second way, I'm just marking the ring because I'm reaching over the table a little bit, so it's harder for me to see where the hole from the pin was. I've got the same thread on my needle. Coming up, catching that side hem. And I'm going to leave a little bit longer of a tail this time. It's hard for me to sew and not have my hand in your way, so I hope you can see enough of what's going on. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a loop between the 2 rings. Instead of pulling that thread tight, I'm going to pull back out just a little bit of a loop, hold it with one finger, go ahead and sew on my ring like I normally would. And then when I move on, I'm doing the same thing, leaving a little bit of a loop. So really all but the difference between the 2 methods is the second one leaves you a little bit more thread to play around with when you've cut it and you're trying to tie your tails. So it's a little bit quicker to tie because you have more thread to work with. This is the part of making a Roman shade that I always wish somebody would knock on my door and say, hey, I love to sew on rings. Can I sew all your Roman shade rings on for you for free? It's never happened yet. I do like to hand sew, but I just don't like sewing on rings. Now this way, because you've used more of your thread, your length might not go as far. So you might have to have that extra needle threaded just to make sure you have enough to get all the way up the side of your shade. And pull your loop taut before you cut. So you're getting all the threads at about the same length. And then you can go ahead and tie the 3 times. The last one, I'm just pulling a little bit tighter on the third one so that I can make sure it's down tight. And a little bit more of a close-up for you is all. And then you need to clean up all those little tails that you cut off and all your pins, but you're good to go because all your rings are nice and secure now. So again, if you want to put a little dab of glue on that knot, feel free. Just give it time to dry before you move anything. So I'm going to give you 2 options of covering your weight bar. Some people have written in and asked me, what if I want to just use lining material for my weight bar? I don't want to buy a whole, I don't know how many yards comes on that roll of weight bar cover, but say you're only doing a couple shades. Here's a way to save a little bit of money. I've cut a piece of lining that is way too much. It's about 2 inches longer than what I need. And I think I cut this 4.5 inches and then folded over the top for a seam allowance, like a 1/2 inch, but I'm not going to sew anything. I'm going to use some type of iron-on or fusible tape. So it has to be sticky on both sides. And that's the 3rd picture over. You can see where I've ironed it on and then start to peel it back. Always try and peel back your fusible tape when it's a little bit on the warm side. It will peel much better for you. And then you can lay your weight bar in the bottom. I'm in the middle on the bottom now, the picture. Roll it up. And once you get to the fusible, just hit it with an iron and you're good to go. Now it's going to leave your ends raw right now. So we have to take care of those. For those of you that do have your weight bar cover and want to use the one we sent you in the kit, you can go ahead and slide your weight bar in, fold over the ends twice so you get rid of that raw edge, and you'll have to hand sew that closed. Now we're going to sew this onto the shade in just a minute, so you could tack it right now and leave your needles attached to it. Yes, I'm using a weight bar that is a threaded rod from one of the home improvement stores. It does not like sliding into that weight bar cover. Let me just tell you that right now. So what you could do is you could cover that with a painter's tape or a masking tape and get rid of all those little ridges for you. But please do clean these rods first. They are not meant to go into fabric. And a lot of times they'll have a little bit of grease or oil on them. So pre-clean them just with a degreaser. And then if you need to tape it, slide it into your weight bar cover. So this is actually covered in blue tape, so you can see that it's not going to make that much of a difference. The tape won't show through. It just makes your weight bar a little bit darker. So we're good there. I'm folding over double. I've tacked it down. Now, again, I'm using the thread that matches my Roman shade. If you were really, really picky about this, you would close your weight bar cover with white or cream and then worry about it. But see, I've got my needle attached to the left. And I've got a needle attached all the way down on the right. So now when I go to sew it, I can easily and quickly sew that on. And a tip for you, because somebody wrote in and said, well, the weight bar didn't come in the right length for me. You're right, it won't. You're going to have it cut unless you're ordering a Roman shade kit maybe for a functional kit or a functional shade. Of course, ours is not functional. So But bolt cutters from a home improvement store, they come in 2 sizes. You want to spend the money to get the ones with the longer handles. The ones with the longer handles also will open all the way, as you'll see in the video, and it will give you a much cleaner cut with a lot less work. So if you're going to be making a lot of Roman shades and you're going to be cutting your own weight bars, invest in the tool with the longer handle. You can see I've covered mine with blue tape, and this is Roger now. Susan's Roger that's going to cut for us. When you open these handles all the way, isn't it nice to be able to manipulate it that way? Get a knee on it and it's cut, just as easy as that. So we're going to add the weight bar. A couple of you have written in and asked me about using zip ties because it's on a stationary shade. I'm going to cover the pros and cons of those zip ties. Mary Beth is asking me, the weight bar, does it have to be a metal rod or can be a wood dowel? You can use anything for your weight bar. If you have an option of using a wood dowel, that's fine. Just make sure that it's not going to bend or reshape itself being in a window. So generally we like to use really heavy plastic or something that's weighted a little bit more. So I personally just have not had good experience with putting a wood weight bar in a Roman shade and not getting a call back a couple years later when it's bent. But depending on your window, it's definitely a possibility. So I'm going up just underneath the second ring, and I'm attaching the weight bar to the fabric. I will have to tie a knot on this because I didn't have a tail, it was already attached. So my way to tie that knot is to not pull all the way through, leave a loop, wrap that needle twice around inside the loop, pull it tight, cut it off. And then you can sew on the second. Check the time, we're doing well on this one. This time I got smart, I left a tail, so I had something to tie to. And my usual 3 for security, and then trim off. So if you want to use zip ties, here's a pro. It's very fast. When you click it shut, you're done. You can just then go ahead and put your board on and install it and you're done. The con, you cannot adjust it. Once those suckers are shut, they're shut. So if you're making something that is very specific to a certain size, I would not suggest zip ties. If you're making something as a valance, and you've got a little leeway on your finished width, then you could go ahead and use zip ties. It does tend to jumble your rings together, so you get a little bit more of a fanning on your side hems, and I'll show you that in a minute. That, and of course, always choose the smallest zip tie available to mankind and try and fit all those rings into it. Just pre-folding all of my rings so I can get to them a little bit easier, a little bit faster. A longer zip tie would have helped, yes. I don't like using zip ties personally. I know it's fast and it's probably the cheaper method to do since you don't have to buy shade cord and orbs. But I just don't like the fact that I don't have any control over adjusting it on the window. And I have to make sure I pulled the tension on both of them the same, and it to me is a hassle. But it is quick. I'll tell you that, it's quick. You're done. So if you just refold to start training in those folds for your shade, technically you would be done. Now, I'm not going to use zip ties on our class project, so I'm going to stop right there. And we're going to work on the mount board. I added that video in after the fact just to talk a little bit about zip ties. So when you're using your staple gun, I'm using a pneumatic gun for this one. I've already got my staples in it and I have my safety glasses on. I'm going to show you the way I fold my corners in. If you've ever seen any of the videos that I did on Rolly Company, you know I'm kind of famous for my perfect upholstery corner. This is showing you that corner. Start with the sides. There's a little safety on this staple gun that I'm not quite used to. Mine does not have a safety on it. And that's why you see me fumbling all the time trying to get the trigger pulled. So I'm folding in down the side. It's going to leave a perfect 45 for me. And then I can fold over. And I think I have a close-up for you on that. Or we'll come at it from a different angle so you can see it. But once you get the fold down, it's very easy to do it very quickly. My folds that are running along the short side of the board are slightly less than the full width of the board. That's important. You don't want your raw edges showing. So here's your close-up. So I take and I fold down the side to get a perfect 45 fold, and then pull tight and fold the rest straight up the shade. I'm turning under my raw edges and then going ahead and stapling. You don't have to cover your board like this if you don't want to. You can cover it however you'd like. Placing the board, it will go just under your finished length fold. And you can just roll it down nice. That's kind of a reminder for you that it needs to go underneath the finished length. And just turning back my raw edges so that I can then put it onto the board. Play with your fabric a little bit. One to staple. Some people will work from the middle out if you've measured the middle. Others will work from the outsides in. Whatever works for you. Notice I changed the angle of my staple. I'm now stapling parallel to the fold on the fabric. In upholstery, you always want to cover the most real estate with the least amount of staples. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to staple parallel to the edge of the board. And just make it pretty. It's probably going to be up in a window. Nobody will ever see this, but it just makes it pretty. And there's my fold line for my finished length. So there's the finished length of my shade. So I'm going to jump back to zip ties for just a minute. Do you see on the second picture on the outside how the bottom hems tend to flare down a little bit? If that's a look that you like, or that's what you've designed for and you want to use zip ties, you've got it perfect. If that's not a look that you like, you don't want to use zip ties, then you want to do it the way we're going to do it in class. Or let's say you already have your zip ties in and you're kind of stuck with them, you could put on a longer weight bar. Instead of cutting your weight bar 4 inches shorter or 3 inches shorter, you could take it out to about a 1/2 inch from the side from your finished width. And then that way it's going to pull that fabric a little bit tighter all the way across, and it will lessen the droopies on the side. But remember, you have no way to control your height. You're stuck with zip ties. So what we're going to do is we're going to use orbs on the bottom, and we're going to use shade cord. So this is a video of me just putting my shade cord up, clamping it to a workstation. I love these workstations. I'll tell you, it's so much easier to work with something at the right height for me rather than having it on the table. So I have my cords in. I've tied it to the very top ring, slid them down through all the rings, put an orb on the bottom, and look how easy this is. Slide it up to your rings match. Of course, you're going to want to dress it and measure, but you do have the opportunity to play with your finished length a little bit here. So I want to measure from the bottom of my board, make sure that my length is the same. Remember, you already have 3/4 of an inch of your board there, so you have to do a little bit of math if you measure from the bottom of the board. I was off by about 1/8 of an inch. And then I can go back and find all of my folds. And again, I apologize, it's hard to do this without getting in front of the camera. I'm just counting all my folds, putting them back in, and then addressing the smile just a little bit on the inside. So I have a smile on the bottom of my shade. So measuring one last time from the top of the board to where I want my finish to be. And that's what it looks like on the side. If you want to adjust for a longer weight bar, of course, you'd have to put it in after you've pulled your orbs up. And since I took my weight bar out because I had took my zip ties off and put the shade cord in, I had to put my weight bar back in. So now you just see me sewing it back in. It's a little tougher to do when it's on the shade hanging in the air. Gravity doesn't work well with you. And what's going to happen is it's going to get all tight around all those cords that you have. So a little bit harder to do it. I'm going to say on site would be the words for it. But it's just a matter of sewing it on both ends, tying it off, clipping it, same that you did. And again, a little bit wider weight bar will help take care of those little folds that kind of tend to want to come in. Little wider weight bar. And I need to do my second side. So what I did on this is I showed you where your weight bar is going to come on the right side and where mine comes on if I make it a little bit wider. That's why it's off center. So the wider you go in your weight bar, the more area you're going to have for a flat part on your section. I like to come in like within a 1/2 inch of my finished width. So my weight bars are going to be a little bit longer than what we're doing in class. I'm going to check the chats while you guys are watching me tie things on. Does it make a big difference where you sew the weight bar on at the 2nd ring or at the 6th ring? It does in a style like this. You want to come up under your very top ring because that's going to give you the width across your entire shade of whatever the width of your weight bar is. So you want to be up higher and then let the folds be the folds. Let them just kind of hang. Now, once you get your weight bar on and you get your shade to the length that you want, everything is at the right area, you do need to come back and tie these cords off because those orbs are a potential choking hazard. So just take your extra cord, run it back through your last ring and tie it in a knot. You can also put a dab of glue on this if you want to. But that shows you compliance in a shade, even though it's a stationary shade, that is compliant. Now the side flaps, this is going to take us a little bit of time. So I'm pattern matching. All I've done is I folded my fabric to find the same pattern. Now my fabric had a 27-inch pattern repeat on it, so I'm wasting a ton of fabric to do a pattern match. Just folding it over. And what you want to do is you want to cut your Peltex 6 inches by 4 inches. Fold it in at 3.5 because 3.5 is the width of your board, your headboard that you used, your dust board. You want glue side out. That was very important for me. I folded it wrong the first way and then just used it on the other side of the shade. You want to shape one for the left and one for the right, and then pin it to your board. Make sure again that your glue side out. Doesn't hurt to just double check yourself there. So this is what my piece looks like if I were to take it off the board and then I have it pinned to the board. I have my scrap of fabric that's pattern matched. I'm just going to crease it really good on the top so that I know that's my fold line. And then I'm going to put pins in it that show me about 1 inch larger than what my piece of Peltex is. So trim away, you only need about 3 or 4 inches more. That way you don't have that whole 54 with the fabric that you're trying to mess with. Mine was quite a large piece. So I'm going to trim that in the next page you'll see. Pin it back on to match my patterns. And then I'm sticking pins in again, where my Peltex ends, where my Peltex ends, and where my Peltex ends. So it's very important that I have the pattern matched, and it's very important that I have these two pieces being able to be married together. You can remove this from the board and you can finger crease the top edge if you want to, because you've got all your pins in it. But quite honestly, we're going to be right back at the board with it again. So I would not do this step, but I wanted to show you what I meant by finger creasing it. Okay. So we're back at the board. We've got our flap of fabric over the Peltex. We've matched the patterns. I'm going to iron just a small section of this to adhere it to the Peltex. I'm melting the glue so that my fabric sticks to it. If you are not comfortable doing this while your shade is up in this position, or you do not have an iron that will allow you to steam or to project heat when it's up in that position, then definitely pin things together, hold it very carefully, take it off, and do this at your table. Once you do have it slightly secured, you end up with what looks like on the bottom on the third piece. Do not run your iron over all the Peltex, because we want to fold our raw edges in. And if you start securing the very top, you're going to lose the ability to put your fabric over your Peltex. So I'm back at the table. I'm going to lay my fabric face down, and I'm going to hit this with an iron now so that all the glue on the Peltex is sticking to the fabric. Refold that corner. I can't tell you how many times you have to refold, and like in the second picture, refold that bend. And then bring all your raw edges over and glue. Doesn't matter if you do top and bottom first or sides first. And it doesn't really matter that you have raw edges on your corners. Don't go to the trouble of trying to fold in a corner with a perfect 45. Way too much work. Now, since I'm using a water-based glue, when I get these all folded in, I'm personally going to hit it again with the iron to draw the moisture out of that glue and dry it quicker. And then cut your blackout lining to fit. I'm using non-fusible blackout. However, I sent you fusible blackout, so you can skip the glue in this step. Just cut it slightly smaller than your finished piece. Put the glue side of the fusible blackout down and go ahead and hit that with an iron. Refold that crease again. And then we're going to cut strips of the loop side of your Velcro. Now, this is an iron-on loop strip that came in your kit, and it's going to go on the 3.5-inch side, like in the bottom picture. We're going to put the hook strip, we're going to staple it to the board. The loop strip is going to be on your return. So here I'm taking a piece of 3.5-inch sticky hook, stuck it to the board, but I'm also going to staple it down. And then I can gently move my shade out of the way. I've now pressure fitted my hook to my loop, so it's going to stay in place, but I want to staple the front of it. And you could, if you absolutely had to, you could put a staple on the side, but boy, you've done so much work to make this pattern match. I'm not sure I'd want to put a staple there. So just trust your Velcro, trust your hook and loop. Once we staple that front down, look at how beautiful that is. Now, I've had people write in and ask me, what if I want to put legs on this because it's going to be an outside mount and I want my folding flaps to be longer? That's perfectly fine. Just make sure that you cut your leg boards. You're going to have to attach a board underneath your dust board coming down the side of the shade. Cut it about 1 inch shorter than your shade, and then cut your fabric to cover your board plus that inch, so it hangs off the bottom about 1 inch. Some of you will never put legs on your Roman shades. Some of you will never put return boards on your Roman shades, and we didn't do it in class. So just answering one of the questions that came in. Why do you need to cut your leg boards shorter? Because they're going to potentially show at a certain angle. If you're sitting down and looking up at your window treatment, you can see under the smile. You don't want to see that wood. So the second one I didn't pattern match. I used a piece of scrap that I had. And quite honestly, you really can't tell that I didn't pattern match it. So if you don't want to go to the trouble of wasting all that fabric and really paying attention to your pattern match, just cut a piece of fabric and put it on for your return flaps. Yes, the return flaps can be as long as you want them to be, as long as they are not longer than the flat part of your shade. Could you tack your return flaps to the shade face? Absolutely, if you wanted to. No really reason to, because we're not going to be manipulating the shade at all. And there's our finished shade with the exact pattern I wanted on it. And I installed it on L brackets. So you just lift your shade out of the way, put your L brackets on the wall, and then screw your dust board down. Pretty easy, right? Beautiful shade and super easy to do. So I don't have any chat. I got about 15 minutes to get through the next part of what we're going to do. So we're going to be really good on time today. If you have any questions on that first Roman shade, make sure you're writing into chat or email me privately, or you can go to the group, the class group on workroomtech.com/groups and join the Relaxed Roman group, and we can answer questions in there too. So project number 2, give you a little bit of a mental break there. I'm changing fabric. Unfortunate thing is you can't really tell the front from the back on this fabric, so I'll have to make sure I really talk in detail on that. We're going to use weight bar cover. We're going to use the clear rings that are in your kit. We're going to use the ring locks. Those are those plastic, weird looking spaceship things. The 2 orbs, and then because this is a functioning shade, we now have the standards, the safety standards to keep in mind. So we're going to have our 2 warning tags plus your rail tag. So I'll cover those at the end of class 3. So how to figure your yardage. Trying to move my picture up and out of the way. So let me move it over. That was sorry about that. That was pretty annoying, wasn't it? To figure yardage for your second shade and your lining, I honestly had to draw a little map. I'm going to figure my width at the widest point, and honestly, that widest point is at the bottom of your shade where it flares out. Now, you don't know what that is yet because I haven't shown you how to get that measurement. But just remember, this is how you would figure your yardage for width. Widest point of your shade plus 8 inches, because we're going to put in that same 2.5 double or 2-inch double fold side hem. Divide that by the width of your fabric, and that's going to give you the number of cuts. Now, again, we're only 1 cut for this particular shade. Then your finished length minus your folds, your permanent folds on the bottom. Again, I'm going to show you what that's going to be. I know I'm going to put in my 3 folds at the bottom, 6 inches per fold, so that's 18 inches. My 1/2 inch bottom hem and 2.5 inches to mount this on a board. So all that added together is going to give me my cut length. So let's go over my class project, finishing the shade, or figuring the yardage rather. Sorry, I'm trying to do 3 things at once, and I've got chats coming in as we talk. So my finished length is going to be 36 inches. You can see I'm looking on the left side of my screen right now at that little drawing that I did. It's 36 inches of flat. My folds are going to take up 18 inches, my 1/2 inch bottom hem, and then my allowance to mark on the board is 2.5 inches. So all total, I'm going to be 57 inches. I'm going to have 1 cut. Divide that by 57 inches, gives me 1 yard and 5/8. I'm going to probably get 2 yards just to play around with for this one. My width, as you can see on the drawing again, is 36 inches. So I'm going to figure that I finish at 28 plus 8. That's where I got my 36. And I'll tell you what, I am no artist. I will be the first to admit that it looks like a kindergartner drew this. But honestly, so what? I'm going to use it as my cut plan, and I'm going to double check all my math on it. So I just take out a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen, and I start writing out a rough draft of what it looks like. Put my measurements down on it so that I know that I can have what I need on there. And then my cuts are my cuts. They're all on there for me. So, and you'll see in the next video, I very much refer to this cut plan. Now, quickly, I want to cover what if you're doing a wider shade and you have seam placement. When you do seam placements for Roman shades, the full width goes in the middle and your pieces go on the side. Now you'll have that seam running at 55 inches down the middle of your shade. So if you don't want the light to shine through and show that there are seams, you're going to really seriously now have to start thinking about interlining your shade or using blackout. But you can do multiple widths if you need to. Okay, let me get back to chat. Where can I get the camera mount? Oh, you mean for when we're shooting? I got that at Best Buy. Just regular Best Buy. Now, the mount that I used for the shade, I'll put that in the comments when I send you your video link today. You see if I can move me back up out of the way. There we go. That is called a workroom valet, and I will put your information in the email that I send out to you. Okay, let's start planning your cuts for this. So what do you want to show on the flat part? These are the same as we did in the first one. What's your fabric going to look like when it's permanently folded? You know, you don't want any bad looks when your pattern comes on top of pattern. You have to leave fabric for your side hems, for your bottom hem, for your board mount area. So make sure when you're playing, you're not playing with your finished, you're playing with your cut. How many folds you're going to have at the bottom and what's the drop going to be? So I know you're all going, well, I don't know what my drop is. You haven't told me that yet. It's coming up. Figure your cut width and length, place your rulers on it to visualize it, or blue painter's tape works wonderful if you want to do it quick and dirty. Make a drawing of your cut plan just on a piece of paper, a sticky note, something to double and triple check those measurements, and then always double check before you cut. So here is how I find my drop or my smile. I take 2 pins in a table or a flat surface, and this is my finished width of my shade. So it's going to be 28 inches apart. I'm using a weighted beat chain, but you could use any type of cording that you happen to have. And just drooping it between my 2 pins that show my finished width. And I'm pulling it down in my smile in the droop until I get to about 3 inches. I like a 3-inch droop. I think it shows. Anything under 3 inches, you kind of lose it when it gets on the window, especially if your shade is mounted very high on the window and you're looking up at it. If you don't have that 3 inches, you lose the whole smile. So I'm going to go with 3 inches. I'm going to mark my beaded weight chain where they hit the pins, stretch that out on my table, and that's going to give me the measurement for my widest part of my shade on the bottom of my cut plan. So it's not just add 3 inches to the width of your shade, it's add what your bead chain measures once you stretch it back out. Mine came out to 38 inches, so 36 or 28 to 36 was my difference. And you can see I've started my ugly cut plan. Works for me. Trust me, it works for me. Now I made it a little prettier on this slide. So you want to draw the flat part of your shade, which I have in blue for you. And that is going to be my finished width plus my 8 inches for my side hems. So that's my 36. And it's my finished length minus my smile. So that's going to be 36 inches also. I'm going to add my board mount fabric on top, 2.5 inches. I'm going to add my permanent fold fabric on the bottom. I'm putting in 3 folds at 6 inches a piece plus my bottom hem. So 6 times 3 plus a half is my 18.5 on the bottom. You need to use the math from your draping session here. Don't just assume that you're always going to have a 38-inch width. Not so. It's what you want to cover in your window. Double check your numbers, do your totals, draw your line down the center, because we're going to actually cut this folded in half. So that dotted line now becomes a fold line. So I went back, just to not confuse myself, I went back and put in my half measurements. And then my tip would be to take your half measurements and highlight them in a different color so you can see them really quickly. So do you have to be this detailed on your cut plan? No. Should you be? Yes, especially when you're cutting a shaped Roman shape. So you can see my cut plan is there. I'm going to cut my face fabric. Oh, I think I have a dog in the video. I just saw him poke his nose in. So I'm just trimming off the bottom so I have a straight edge to start. And because I'm using, there he is again. Because I'm using a pattern fabric, I'm going to cut 1/2 of my width and then cut to pattern for the rest of it. So it's all cut off. If you're using a plain fabric, that won't be a problem. You can just cut it off straight. I think the puppies wanted a treat and I was not being nice to them by stopping and giving them treats. So you see, I've got my fabric folded face in. Fold is running up along the outside of my table right now. I'm marking my cut. So I know my half is 18 inches, right? I'm marking up. And then I'm measuring at my numbers on my cut plan. And I'm going to have just a slight angle, just a slight angle. So basically what all I'm doing is replicating my cut plan from my paper onto the fabric. Marking that little bit of an angle. And it's only like 1.5 inches, 2 inches. It's not a real big angle. And I'm measuring up and double guessing myself. So I'm going to get that handy dandy cut plan and lay it out just like my fabric is laid out. I have a magic hand coming in to remove the glue bottle and the iron for me. We were doing like 6 different projects in the workroom that day. So wherever I have a measurement on my cut plan, I'm putting a measurement on my fabric. Double checking it again. And yes, make sure your fabric is right sides together when you folded this. And this is marking the top where my board is going to be. Marking the flat side of my shade. So this is my 36 inches that's coming down, plus my 2.5 inches. And I know you can't see it well on here. I did not want to put permanent marker to this fabric because it would have bled through. So just trust me that my cuts are going to mirror my cut plan. And this is where I found out that I have a little bit of a metallic thread running through the embroidery. So it did not like cutting. So you'll see when I pull the rest of the fabric away, I've got a big rectangle and then a little bit of an angle on the bottom. Not a whole bunch, but a little bit of an angle. Again, absolutely vital that you are face in right now, faces together. Now, this is a trick from my upholstery days that I'm going to show you. We have a straight and then we have an angle. And then when I want to turn in my 2-inch side hem or my 4 inches for my double 2-inch side hem, that fabric's not going to lay down flat. So I'm going to make what's called a relief cut. This is vital that you do it. I only want to cut 2 inches of my 4-inch hem. So you're going to see me measure 2 inches and then back that ruler off maybe 1/8 of an inch and cut in. If you cut more than 2 inches, it's going to show when you turn your hem in. So I'm at the point where the flat meets the angle. You can see my 2 inches, and then I'm going to back it off just a titch from that and cut straight in right up to that pin. And now you'll see why we did that. Measuring over my 4 inches. And it was just lucky for me that I could follow this perfect pattern all the way up the side of the shade. Worked out very well. So iron down all the flat area, just ignore the bottom for right now. And then we're going to turn in the 4 inches on the bottom. So it's almost like doing this twice. Most people will turn it this way, and then you'll go, nope. I'm going to have a little tail of fabric sticking over on the bottom. See how my little tail down here is a little bit longer? That's perfectly fine. You're going to trim that off anyway. and see the open cut. There's my 2 inches of my relief cut. Press that in, good. And now when you go to fold it back, everything's going to lay perfect. I'm at 1 o'clock right now, but please bear with me. I've got just maybe 5 or 6 more minutes of this. I couldn't figure out a way to shorten this video anymore for you. I know it's hard to tell, but I do have my right side of my fabric down on the table. You know you've done this right if you have that little hunk hanging over the bottom. Yep. So I'll show you again just for purposes. Just backed it off a little bit from my 2 inches. And fold in the same 4 inches. Folding in the flat part first and ironing it, and then worry about the bottom part. Now, what I didn't show you in this video is I'm also measuring for my finished width. So I'm not just assuming my 4 and 4 is going to make it perfect. I've already measured. I know I have my 4 inches left over. This fabric had no take up on it when I ironed it. Again, folding in the bottom. So your bottom tail, I love how it shows in this. It just hangs over maybe about a 1/2 inch or so, 3/4 of an inch. And then opening and making a double fold. The better you press in your side hems now, the less work you're going to have later. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my pressed face fabric. I'm going to lay my lining face up on the table. So again, right sides to right side. My fabric is face down on the table. And I'm going to cut my lining using my wonderfully pressed face fabric as my pattern. So be very careful when you do this. What you want to do is you want to roll your good face fabric back out of the way and cut about 1/4 of an inch smaller on the sides, but straight on the bottom. So you're going to cut that extra fabric that when we folded in the side hems left you that little tail, you want to cut that straight off. So match your top and bottoms when you cut your lining, but your sides need to be slightly smaller, just slightly smaller. You can pin this bottom. Remember in the first class, I showed you how to fold the 2 folds so that everything was folded correctly. So you're ready to sew in your bottom hem. You can leave it like this if you want to, or you can go ahead and fold in your side hems. And if you really wanted to, I guess you could sew that bottom hem, but we're going to start there on the next class. So your homework is to finish your first class project, whether you want to cover your weight bar with the weight bar cover or you want to make your own, whether you want to go slightly wider on your weight bar or not as wide, you want the little droops on the side, you don't want the droops on the side. Oh my goodness, there's a bazillion different ways you could do that. Just know that we sent you the orbs and the shade cords so that you could make it how I would make it. So remember, we have a class group that's been started on workroomtech.com/groups. You do need to put in a little bit of information so that you can join that group. And it's a great place to answer questions. I put the class links there for the recordings and just some little tidbits on questions that come in as we go. I will put the information down. I'm writing that down now for the Workroom Valet. I will look that up for you. It's a little bit expensive to get. I will tell you, some people use snare drum cymbal stands and put a board on it. But a Workroom Valet is very adjustable. And once you have one, you're going to use it forever. Next steps, we're going to start out by reviewing session 2 with that fold on the side, the magic fold. We'll sew the bottom in, we'll finish up the shade. I'm going to go through step by step of your mount system. That's the system that you ordered. If you've chosen to use that particular lift system, I don't know if you're using it or not. So if you're using something different, I'm not going to be much help on the class itself, but I can always try and help you through email. We're going to go over dressing installation, and most importantly, we're going to go over cord safety and pricing. So bear with me, but stay with me on session 3. I know I've gone a little bit long today. My apologies for that. There was just a lot of information and tips and tricks that I wanted to get in today. But thank you for joining me, and I will see you in 1 week so that we can finish off our Roman shades. Bye.